Guys, what did I tell you about stealing all of the chairs? What's going on here?
Oh, hey, Bradley. This is a brainstorming ritual. Yeah, we're trying to summon unholy inspiration from the void.
Okay, you do know there are easier ways to get inspired than opening abyssal doorways, though, right? Sure, but those aren't as fun. Voidy? Is that you? In the flesh. Or tentacles, I guess. Holy crap, Voidy! I've missed you. How have you been? What's with the emo haircut? I've been finding myself, drifting upon infinite seas of nihilism. Oh, so you're in your emo phase.
It's not a phase!
Right, of course. Well, are you doing any writing? Of course. I'm working on my album. It's called Cut Me and I Bleed Stars. Huh, not bad actually. So, how are you otherwise? I exist, empty like the void. As they say in Outer Wilds, the universe is, and we are. Oh, you finally played it! Chia! Come on, tell me, did you cry at the end? Oh, totally. I sobbed for days. Okay, well, why don't I join you guys on your ritual here? You know, I could use a burst of inspiration, so what are we all brainstorming for?
We want this to be in Connor's magazine.
Yeah, but we're no good at cosmic horror. Wait, that's what this is all about? You all want to submit to the Oblivion Index? Well, you could have just asked me for help. No! Cosmic horror is supposed to be solitary. I have to write it alone, in the darkness, like Voidy. Oh no, not you too. Arnold, this whole emo phase thing looks kind of weird on you, man. It's not the phase! Okay. Well, cosmic horror isn't too difficult. Aha! Says the guy who has an entire cosmic horror mythos. Okay, Fenton, fair point. But Connor's also working on a dark medieval fantasy novel, so Fenton, you could do something in Divine with one of the old gods. Aha! And give myself nightmares. No, thank you. Isn't that kind of the point of horror, though? Bradley, why don't let me take it from here? Cosmic horror, like human sanity, is delicate. It requires a steady hand and a broken heart. I honestly didn't expect cosmic horror and emo music to go together, but yeah, I can see it. Okay, I'm gonna get back to the podcast then. Oh yeah, the podcast. How is the Penny Dreadful podcast doing these days? Oh, that's actually Mina's podcast. Mine is the Saved as Draft podcast. I know. I just needed you to wrap up the intro so I could start my set. Oh, I see. Huh. I wonder what kind of music he'll be playing.
The best thing about tonight's that we're not fighting.
Hey, wait a second. This sounds familiar.
Could it be that we have been this way before?
Voidy, this one's taken.
I know you don't think that I am trying. I know you're wearing thin down to the core.
Oh boy, here it comes.
But hold your breath, because tonight will be the night that I will fall for you over again. Don't make me change my mind.
And there it is. Cosmic horror indeed. Oh man, I had way too much fun with that intro. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 46 of the Saved as Draft podcast. I've got another amazing episode for you this week featuring one of the finest cosmic horror writers in the game. That's right, this week I'm sitting down with Connor Mancuso to talk about everything from his work on the First Indulgence Challenge to his current projects and what he's got going on with the Oblivion Index horror magazine. Before that, though, we'll take a tour of our weekly shoutouts, discuss last week's Wandering Prompt winner, take a look at this week's Power Prompt stories, and discuss conveying emotions in your work. This week also features our first indie release radar segment, powered by Bookstack. Stay tuned for that later in the episode. As you can tell, it's a packed week, so let's dive right in. But first, a word from this week's sponsor. Today's episode of the Saved as Draft podcast is sponsored by Horror Blockers. Hey Jill, you gotta take a look outside.
What is it?
An unknowable cosmic horror entity is destroying the fabric of our universe. It's awesome!
That is awesome, but aren't we gonna go insane if we look at it?
Nah, not with these.
Why are you handing me sunglasses?
They're not sunglasses. They're horror blockers. They protect your mind from being utterly shattered so you can enjoy the sight of things that should not be.
That's amazing. Okay, let's take a look.
Oh, wow. It's beautiful.
Wow, I can feel my sanity being pushed to its limit. Barry, you okay? Oh, well, at least mine are working. Tired of missing out on sights that would otherwise shatter your mind? 3 out of 4 cultists agree. Horror blockers are the best way to enjoy the sight of your favorite eldritch horrors. Try horror blockers today and catch a glimpse of what lies beyond the veil of our understanding. Now 76% more effective.
All right, and we're back. This week marks the second publication anniversary of Hazel Allen's Inside the Sun and Moon, a poetry collection that you can get yourself on sale digitally for just 99 cents. If you have yet to experience Hazel's poetry, don't fret. To celebrate this milestone before we get into this week's shoutouts, I'll be reading a piece from the collection right here on the show. Here is A Ghost with Love on Its Mind by Hazel Allen. I am on my way, under the moonlight, wandering through the empty streets, drifting quietly as if I were a specter, with an unfinished task between we. If the moment arose to confess it, I would finally proclaim my love to you. But otherwise, I would let myself wander like the lost souls stuck deep within the growing fields of asphodel, unable to resonate with the confidence I had admired from you so deeply. But alas, perhaps one day I will drift with everything I need in myself, the tone and the swoon, to woo you forever. Beautiful. Simply beautiful. Thank you again to Hazel for allowing me to read this piece on the show, and be sure to check the show notes to learn more about this big anniversary celebration, which also will feature serialized versions of the poems and a giveaway. Next up, we'll start with a couple Unquiet World shoutouts from Jennifer Jorgensen's ongoing event, and then I'll look at 5 stories selected from my weekly shoutouts thread in my subscriber chat. Remember to drop your links there every Tuesday for a chance to be featured right here on the show or on Mina Howell's Penny Dreadfuls podcast. First up in our Unquiet World shoutouts this week is The Lawman by Jennifer Jorgensen. Now, this one is extra exciting because it's Jennifer's official entry into her shared universe. It's also a gigantic piece with its own table of contents to help you come and go as you please. Love that attention to detail. I checked out part 1 for the purpose of this shoutout, and I gotta say, Jennifer has me hooked with a larger mystery here. One thing I loved in this first chapter is how she uses the presence of spirits to have our main character team up with one of his heroes and start piecing together clues toward the overarching mystery. A very intriguing concept is proposed involving the ability for spirits to attack the living and temporarily knock them unconscious. I thought this was an interesting detail, and as usual, Jennifer's atmospheric writing and sharp dialogue are on full display here. She steps effortlessly into this universe she has created and immediately sets up a very intriguing mystery. Here's an excerpt I enjoyed. Jared sat and waited politely for several minutes before the old woman reappeared with a tray balanced on her arm. On it stood 2 cans of cold Coca-Cola and 2 glasses full of ice. On seeing her, Jared immediately stood and moved to help her, taking the tray and setting it on the table as she settled herself with a groan. "Thank you, Ida," he said as he resituated himself and reached for a can. She just nodded her approval and reached for her own glass.
"I didn't see what happened to that boy,"
she offered diffidently as she poured the soda. Jared swallowed his disappointment.
"But I did see something interesting,"
she added, a note of pleasure in her tone. She liked having his attention, maybe having anyone's attention. "You did?" he asked, giving her what she wanted. She drew out pouring her Coke, waiting for the foam to settle, then topping off the glass, making him wait. Finally, she met his gaze again, her eyes twinkling.
"One of those ghosts was out there the night before it happened,"
she offered.
"And I think I know who it was."
Jared leaned forward with interest. "Is that so? Who was it, ma'am?" If you've enjoyed any of the Unquiet World stories for this event, this one is a must-read. Fantastic work from Jennifer. Our second Unquiet World shoutout this week is Nothing Compares by Leanne Schaller. This is part 1 of a 3-part story, but it sets up a fascinating premise set in the Unquiet World universe. In this one, We learn about a woman who has yet to encounter one of the spirits that have been appearing all over the world. This has led to a new term, FOMOG, or fear of missing out on ghosts, which is hilarious and honestly would probably be a thing if this happened in our world. Now, all of this changes when she finally encounters the spirit of a man from 1811 who mistakes her for his betrothed. What follows is a story where she helps this spirit find closure, only for the results to devastate him and he leaves. By the end, she finds him again, and I won't spoil where it leaves off at the end of part 1, but I truly love the characters and connection in this piece. The way that a bond forms between these two people feels very organic, and it got me invested in what happens next. Here's an excerpt. The man wore black. His white shirt closed off at the neck with a black cravat. His breeches ended below the knee with white stockings and square silver-buckled black shoes. The knitted silk hinted at padding to show off a shapely calf. A well-turned calf isn't the same as a codpiece, but sadly the man dressed for a later era. "Hello," I called. "Can I help you?" I held back from asking if he were lost. Men tend not to like admitting to that. He turned from his perusal of my early spring garden and the ancient cherry tree just coming into bud. His mouth dropped into an O shape. "Emma!" He hurried to me, hope dawning upon his otherwise unremarkable face, framed with artfully arranged dark curls. Faint white wisps trailed behind him. "No!" I backed into the house, grabbing the door. "You've got the wrong woman. I'm Emily." He halted, his head at a slight tilt to examine me. Not a creepy zombie head tilt either, a perfectly normal one, thank you. "You are not my Emma." He reached for me. I swatted him off, my arm passing without resistance through his forearm. His hand sunk into my cheek. We stumbled apart, shocked. The cold burned my cheek, my gums, part of my tongue. "Your attire is strange, but—" His shoulders slumped. "Forgive me, madam." He swooped a florid, dispirited bow. "You are the very image of her." Awesome stuff. And don't forget, the Unquiet World event is still ongoing, so be sure to submit your stories while you still can. Next, we'll dive into this week's shoutouts selected from my subscriber chat. First up is Selected Memories by Nigel Code. This is my first time reading a story starring the character of David Hammond, but Nigel includes some context here for new readers like myself. This story is set in the early days of David's career, which saw him leave his job as an industrial chemist to pursue the world of paranormal sciences. I love that premise, so I was really excited to dive in here. And the first thing I noticed was how the storytelling and narration perfectly walks the line between grounded observation and a healthy curiosity of the unknown. It feels like it was written by someone with a background in science and a mind open to other possibilities. I really enjoyed that aspect of this piece. As the story goes on, we join David for a job investigating the concept that a spirit will leave the body upon someone's death and it can be seen or recorded. A woman at death's door offers herself as the subject of this experiment, and the story goes from there. I don't want to spoil anything because I really love how the story handles paranormal themes. It does so with respect and curiosity, and I really admire that. Here's an excerpt to give you an idea of the style that I really enjoyed here. The combination of circumstances landed him the job in the first place, but it had not been an enjoyable experience. As a trained scientist with a genuine interest in what may or may not be paranormal, he hated all the fakery, conveniently finding ghosts on demand as the cameras recorded, the whole sorry business of night vision cameras and screams. Thankfully, this was not being filmed for television, and it had been the old woman herself who had requested David to be there. That had been months ago, when this had been something that would happen in the future. Her illness may let her live for another year or two, even longer perhaps. Now that the future was here, her time had run out. Having heard so many claims that some sort of spirit was seen to part company with the body, a miraculous spectacle at the very point of death, she had offered her last moments to test this theory one way or another. She believed that if anybody could sense such a thing happening and give a true account of the experience, it would be David. That had been when she could joke about her own death and of coming back to haunt people. She no longer joked about it, wasn't able to. It had been weeks since she had last said anything coherent, days since her last mumbled words had been spoken, unheard by anybody. Really, really great story there. Our second shout out this week is The Stars Look Very Different Today by Sarah. This is a flash fiction piece starring an astronaut named Tom who encounters an unexpected anomaly during a routine patrol on the planet Mars. It's a quick read, but the intensity is amazing. I love how it starts lighthearted and then quickly shifts as Tom realizes something isn't quite right. That sudden turn is handled really well, and it had me leaning forward for the final stretch of the story. A really nice piece that left me wanting more. So here's a short excerpt, so I don't spoil the whole thing. Ground control to Major Tom. Tom hummed as he patrolled the Mars dome. He loved Bowie. It may even be the reason he became an astronaut. Most people didn't get the reference, but his inner child grinned every time. Red dust stretched endlessly beyond his visor. Routine duty. Circle the dome and scan for damage. In 5 years, nothing had gone wrong, but one breach could spell certain death for the whole settlement. Check that one out. It's really good. Like I said, quick read too. Our third shout out this week is The Singular Point of Gravity by Rebecca Watson. So this story is actually based on a prompt from Carlos M, and it seems like Carlos also helped out with feedback for Rebecca before the piece went live. Just had to stop and say, that's awesome. I love to see it. Shout out to Carlos M for being a great member of the community. That's fantastic to hear. Okay, so Carlos's prompt for the story was the following. I didn't love you with my smile. I didn't love you in my hugs. I didn't love you in my kisses. Because I loved, I smiled at you. Because I loved, I hugged you. Because I loved, I kissed you. But how did I love you? Okay, so given that prompt, let's read through Rebecca's story here. And now that I've finished it, I guess we're going to make me crying on the podcast a weekly thing. Nobody told me. But seriously, Rebecca's story here is an incredibly bittersweet tale about a love that echoes through time, but in the present is nothing more than a memory for the person who is left. As someone who lost a friend recently, this piece really explores grief in a beautiful way. It dances between the past and the present, offering us a glimpse into how our protagonist met the love of his life that is now lost. I've been a fan of Rebecca's work for a while now, but this one is truly my favorite piece I've read from her. It's achingly beautiful and extremely well worth your time. Here's an excerpt. Elias opened his eyes, the memory fading back into the smell of coffee. The cold ceramic of the mug was heavy and real in his hand, anchoring him. He remembered standing by that window 5 years ago, an hour early, looking for the bus that was sure to be late. He hadn't been looking for a woman, he'd been looking for a destination, a point of gravity to fix his wandering life. When she came back the next day, placing the umbrella on this table, the cafe became proof that his life was no longer wandering. It was home. Now, the silence of this table was the destination. He finally understood the difference between acting out of love and being in love. It was the difference between that initial hope and this final, terrifying emptiness. The quiet across the table was what he had truly feared back then. Not that she would forget him, but that he would one day be sitting here alone, without her compass. Incredible. Absolutely amazing. I'm getting chills right now just reading that. Amazing work from Rebecca. Our fourth shout out this week is Selenophile Melinda Cohen by J. Allen Winchester, or Jaden as I know him. Fun fact, Jaden and I co-authored an audio drama for Audio Mazes earlier this year. It's called Light, Hope, and Stardust, and it's free to listen to at audiomazes.com. So, back to the story here. This piece from Jaden is a Dodeca short prequel story, and it also features narration as well. I love seeing that. There's some excellent context at the beginning of the piece too, which reads, "In an old world once new, humanity rebuilds in the wake of their ancestors' wars. Points of view vary, but some old debates seem to stand the test of time. Can beliefs be set aside to coexist? Meet the souls who inspired the heart of a herald burdened with hope in this prequel tale of the Dodecatheon saga." Jaden's narration is awesome here. His voice is warm and soothing, which adds to the atmosphere of this piece. I also really liked how he changes his voice for dialogue. It gives the characters a unique tone and cadence when they speak. Great stuff. The writing here is superb as well. Jaden balances exposition and scene setting with excellent dialogue that moves the story forward and highlights the personalities of the characters along the way. It has an amazing flow that really kept me engaged. Not only that, but the imagery really helped me feel grounded and present in the moment. It's a wonderful experience, especially if you happen to listen and read along like I did. Here's an excerpt. The Morenos didn't care about their community. They weren't even originally from their part of the old world. Mel had heard rumors as a child about the old church fire being connected to their arrival, but no one could prove it. Without the church, the Vatican had no means to communicate with them. Oddly enough, there was never a new parish built, which was unheard of for a trading post as large as theirs. Could they have done something with Carol? "You all right, Melinda?" Mel flinched to hear her full name. Looking up, she saw an old warehouse worker standing by her wagon. His warm brown visage frowned at her reaction, but she managed to shake the anxiety away from her face. "Just tired, Mitch," she answered before standing. rubbing her sweaty palms on her denim jeans. She sighed heavily.
Been a long couple of months.
Yeah, I know, the man agreed solemnly. We're about done loading you up. Did you want to wait for Clay inside? We can watch this boy for you.
No, I think I want to try heading back to the house tonight.
You want one of us to ride out with you?
Why would you do that? It's out of the way, even if you did stay the night.
There's some shady business from the Morenos around the trading post. Mitch lowered his already deep voice, making Mel pause. Most of the time they're close-lipped, but when the booze starts flowing at the tavern, some of them slip some nasty talk. Like how they're cornering the men of the homesteads these days now and joking about wildfires.
Amazing work. Definitely check out what Jaden's doing. It's awesome stuff. Our final shout out this week is Nat 20 by Brennan. This story is described as a short horror story with a side of D&D, so I was hyped from the moment I started reading. It also has a gnarly opening that throws us right into the action. And one thing I loved about this piece is how it effortlessly jumps between the in-game world and the real world. It doesn't feel jarring either. Brennan's writing style works perfectly to bridge the two settings, as if the players of the D&D game are inside the world itself. The horror element of this piece also sneaks up on you with a brilliant rising sense of dread. Works, and the quintessential Nat 20 moment is brilliant as well. An amazing combination of meta-storytelling, nerdy humor, and true terror. This story really does have it all. Here's an excerpt. After questioning some townsfolk, the only place still open to travelers was the tavern at the far end of town. "Let's go check out this tavern," Samuel said. The group slowly made their way through town, keen to keep an eye out toward the shadows that darted out at them from the corners and crevices of the surrounding buildings. A dim light and the sound of music spilled out of the tavern's windows. Amelia grabbed the tavern's door handle and pulled it open. The group was greeted by the sweet smell of ale and the loud clamoring of its guests. Walking toward the bar, they called over one of the barmaids. A woman walked over and greeted the group. "How much does a room cost for the night? We just got in from out of town," Brent asked. She responded,
20 gold per room. Each can fit 2 people.
"We will get 2 rooms then," Samuel responded, handing over a small pouch of gold. As she was counting up the pieces, Brent saw an opportunity and asked, "Have you heard anything about a suspicious group moving into town recently? They might look—"
I haven't heard anything about that.
She cut him off, her eyes slightly glancing past them.
We'll have to try something else, Amelia whispered to Brent. Maybe ask around to some of the patrons.
"I'd like to perform a charisma check and kiss the barmaid," Nathan announced abruptly. Amazing work from everyone this week. Definitely check out that story from Brennan, too. That was really, really good. Remember to keep an eye out for the next podcast shout-out thread this coming Tuesday so you can submit your links as well, and you'll find that in my subscriber chat. Next, we'll look at our Wandering Prompt winner right after a new segment highlighting indie book releases. Hello, and welcome to our first ever indie release radar, powered by Bookstack.
Which is a website. Bookstack is a website.
Yes, Arnold. You can find all of these releases and more at indiebookstack.com, where you'll also find direct links to the Amazon pages in the show notes. Let's take a look at some new releases from this first week of December 2025. First up is The Court of Lost Faith by Hannah K. Scales. The Court of Lost Faith is the highly anticipated second entry in the Ethelina book series. Featuring sinister magic, shattering betrayal, and romance that burns hotter than vengeance, this scintillating sequel sees our protagonist setting out to prove her strength and master a power that could either save or consume her. Discover what happens next by grabbing your copy of The Court of Lost Faith today. Arnold, what do you think of this one?
Ooh, I like it. Magic. Betrayal. I guess I could read a little romance too. Haha, it has been a while.
Second is Land of Heart and Shadows by Olivia Gold. Land of Heart and Shadows is a brand new prequel set in the world of House of Death and Shadow. Darcy awakens in a new world created by her own hands, but soon becomes enthralled by a rugged man named Kieran. Can Darcy find the fresh start she's looking for, or will the darkness that seeks her finally claim its prize? Find out which one it ends up being by ordering your copy of Land of Heart and Shadows today, which again is out right now. Arnold, you gonna check out this one too?
Yeah, I have to check out all the books. I have to keep up with Bookstack. I will read the whole catalog.
Admirable. Okay. And number 3 this week is Eli, Blood and Chrome by R.J. Milner. Eli, Blood and Chrome is a new standalone novel set in the high-stakes universe, which features gritty, romantic sagas of hunger and betrayal in a dystopian world. Biker priest Elias Fowler doesn't pick sides. He doesn't get involved. That is, until Frankly Starling enters his life. What follows is a relentless pursuit that will test their limits and force Eli to confront the past he buried if he ever hopes to love again. Intrigued? Check out Eli, Blood and Chrome, which is out now, and you can find a link in the show notes. Arnold, this one seems right up your alley. What do you think?
Yeah, I like Blood and Chrome. Not necessarily together, but I'll try it. It sounds good.
All right, and thanks again to Bookstack and Hazel Allen for helping create this new segment. Be sure to check the show notes for links to those books on Amazon. And remember, you can find your next indie read at indiebookstack.com. All right, and next up, we'll take a look at this week's Wandering Prompt winner, which was Mary Ellen Brady with the story The Weight of Wishes. Now, due to the popularity and speed of Wandering Prompt submissions, I'm also pleased to announce that I'll be selecting not one, but 2 stories to feature from the Wandering Prompts going forward. The first story will be featured here, and that is still going to be the one that gets published the fastest. So keep an eye out for that one each week, but for those who listen to the episode later, I will include a second Wandering Prompt story as part of the weekly shoutouts each week going forward. This means that our second winner will be chosen at random, just like I choose the other weekly shoutouts. So, if you're here listening to this, you get the Wandering Prompt, don't fret if the first one's already been taken. Go ahead and post something, and you will be potentially selected for a spot on the show as part of this new setup. So, with all that being said, let's talk about The Weight of Wishes by Mary Ellen Brady.
Submitted mere hours after last week's episode, this story is for a prompt that asked writers to tell the tale of a being experiencing pain for the first time.
Yeah, I remember what life was like before pain. Now I'm just in pain all the time.
I go through life at a solid 4 on the pain scale every day. It's a 7 if we're talking about mental pain.
Okay, guys, save that info for your doctor or your therapist. Let's talk about Mary Ellen's story. As always, Mary Ellen managed to tell a story with a grand, nearly cosmic scale and then made it feel painfully human by the end.
I agree. I thought I was getting into a full-length sci-fi fantasy novel. Kinda wish that had ended so soon.
I didn't cry, but you might. I didn't, though. Nope. No tears here.
Okay, let's check out an excerpt. She had burned at 15 million degrees Kelvin for longer than Earth had been solid. Now her core temperature plummeted. 10,000 K, 9,000 K, 8,000 K, and the sensation that accompanied it felt like evaporating, like being erased 1 degree at a time. Her body began to shake, violent, involuntary tremors that she could not control, could not stop, could not understand. The shivering terrified her more than the fall, so much sensory confusion, pain from everywhere all at once. Her spine compressed under its own weight, vertebrae grinding against vertebrae with a sensation that made her gasp. Yet another involuntary response, air sucking into lungs she didn't remember forming. Everything pulled down. There was no up anymore, no directionless floating. Gravity had claimed her. Every joint was a hinge that bent wrong. Every muscle a fiber screamed when she asked it to hold her upright. "Why does everything hurt?" she whispered. Her voice shocked her. Sound made from flesh, from vocal cords vibrating in her throat. Amazing, really incredible work. A story that bridges the gap between gods and humans through the mutual experience of pain on multiple levels. Amazing work from Mary Ellen. And stay tuned for this week's Wandering Prompt later in this episode. Next up is our Power Up Prompt Stories. First up this week is A Parting Tale by Daniel Coates. This is a story from last week that I missed, so I wanted to share it first this week because it's an excellent addition to the romance prompt stories from last week. It features a character writing a fantasy story, only to discover that someone else has been adding to their document. It starts out harmless, but then it becomes clear that these additions are personal to our protagonist. There are details in here that only one other person would know, and they're not around anymore. So what's happening? Well, I won't spoil that, but it is a beautiful story that quickly tugs on your heartstrings. An amazing entry as always from Daniel, so be sure to check it out before diving into this week's Dystopian Tales. And speaking of, let's get into this week's entries. Your prompt was a dystopian genre story featuring a setting called the Upper City, a character known as the Retired Smuggler, and a conflict about a hidden secret the government is keeping from everyone. Our first story for this week's prompt is The Paper Fence by J.M. Gooding. Once again, JM outdoes himself with this incredible dystopian sci-fi piece. It begins with a warm scene showing our protagonist repairing a toy bird. It sets up a nice atmosphere before uniformed government soldiers show up at the door. The dialogue is tense, but eventually our character goes with them to a place called the Apex. What follows is a slow unraveling of the hidden truth from this week's prompt, and it's a revelation that had my jaw on the floor. There's actually a game I played years ago that had a similar twist about the true nature of its world, but I have never seen anything like that until I read JM's piece this week, and honestly, I think Jimmy here did it better. A wildly creative entry for this week's prompt, and one hell of a way to start this week's stories. I love it. Next, we've got Change of Plan by Suparna Chakraborty. This story is set in the Habitat, and it stars a character named Zella, who we join as she's waiting for her son to be dismissed from school. Suparna once again effortlessly weaves world building into this piece, allowing us to catch glimpses of the larger world without slowing down the pacing. Soon, someone shows up from her past, though, and we learn about a major shift happening soon that will have dire consequences for the people of the Habitat. It's a tense moment that barrels toward a nod at what could happen next. I love the cliffhanger ending here, and I'm looking forward to more of this story from Suparna. Remember, you can find links to all this week's stories in the show notes. Next, we've got Providence Episode 3 from L.G. Wells. As always, LG pulls me right in with an excellent opening scene that delivers some superb imagery and dialogue that immediately gets me invested in what's going on. The characters discuss a legend involving a smuggler named Raven. They argue about whether or not he was even real before stumbling upon an old and dusty journal. I'm sure you can guess who the author is. And from there, we dive straight into the journal itself, switching POV to hear from Raven. LG uses the journal entry structure here really well, giving us insight into the smuggler's mind and leaping from one entry to the next to keep the story moving. I also have to shout out the musical pairing. You know I love it when people do that. Here we have Sunshine, Adagio in D minor, and it's a beautiful orchestral piece that captures the scale and scope of the story. An exceptional pairing indeed. I highly recommend it alongside the full piece. Next we've got The Water Thief by Daniel Coates. Daniel once again brings his A-game with this week's power-up prompt story. We're introduced to our retired smuggler as he focuses intently on looking through a telescope while taking notes. His wife brings him some food. We get a glimpse into what he's looking at. Not only that, but Daniel expertly weaves in some of the backstory into the dialogue, which I enjoyed here. From there, he learns that someone from his old life has been asking to meet him at the usual spot. Another thing I'll say without spoiling too much here is that I love Daniel's take on the hidden secret. Plays very well into the world he's created, and as always, the immersion and atmosphere are on point. A wonderful read. Next, we have The Lower City by Anton Anderson. This is one of my favorites from Anton. It has shades of the series he did based on my sci-fi horror story, The Unfathomable Beast of Xanadu 4. What I mean by that is that he also leans into a sharp style of narration that feels both jaded and exhausted. It reflects the state of the world really well. And as always, Anton's world building is excellent here too. I love details like the garbage cannons that fire trash outside the city walls. The differences in imagery between the upper and lower cities is also explored really well. They have a strong visual identity to each of them. And the ending. Oh, I love the turn at the end. It perfectly fits the dystopian prompt and reminds me of one of my favorite series Anton has done. But dare I say, I like this one even better. Amazing work. Next, we've got Redemption is Overrated by Mina Howell. And this is the first in a new 6-part series from Mina. Right off the bat, I was really impressed and intrigued by the concept of the story. It's set in a version of the setting from this week's prompt, but in this case, the layered city is inspired by the levels of hell from Dante's Inferno. In this one, we're in the Wrath layer of the city, but Mina promises to visit other circles as the series goes on. I really love the world building here. There's a section at the beginning that talks about how the protagonist lost someone close to them and immediately sets up fascinating questions about what happened. Not only that, but Mina shows us all how she does crime noir style tone and dialogue in this piece. The conversations are sharp, the narration carries a weight to it that I haven't seen from her before, and I gotta say, I'm a fan of this style. You can bet I'll be keeping an eye on this series as it develops, and you should too. Next up, we have Bequest Part 1 by Jennifer Jorgensen. Jennifer explains in the beginning of this post here that the story was intended to be mostly set in the upper city, but now it's split between up top and down below. More on that in a moment. She also mentions that the hidden secret here is an impetus, but not so much a conflict. Totally fine. The prompts are meant to be flexible, so this works. So, let's talk about what she did here with Part 1, and keep in mind this is a 2-part story, so check out the second half when that releases soon. In Part 1, we're introduced to Annie, a pregnant woman whose father was a smuggler. In this world, the rich folks up top can't have babies, so they hire smugglers to bring infants from surrogate mothers down below. Annie wants her baby to have the best life it can, so she spends the last of her funds to send a message to her estranged father. From there, we switch over to Elliot Manners, who receives the message while halfway through a bottle of whiskey. Looks like his past is coming back to haunt him. Jennifer's writing here is fantastic. The tone and voice offers up atmosphere and world building, while her dialogue brings out unique personalities from each of the characters. In this way, she also switches between Elliot and Annie's perspective as the story goes on, creating a wonderful structure and pacing that I really enjoyed. And here's the thing, I'm always going to recommend a Jennifer Jorgensen story, but this one is a fantastic entry into a growing catalog of her work. Check the show notes for a link. Next up is Emerald Heights by Brenda, A Voice That Wonders. Brenda has once more surprised me with this piece, which utilizes a poetic structure to tell the story. The short lines and structured stanzas really drive home a lot of the lines here, making it a great fit for this narrative. I also love the use of repetition with certain words and phrases. An example being, "You wouldn't recognize me, you wouldn't want to." There's a confidence and focus in the writing here that really pulled me in, made me feel like I'm listening to the wisdom of someone who has seen far too many things in their time. And thanks to the poetic structure, there's a lot of standout lines. I have to call out one of them, which reads, "Rebellion sounds romantic until you've watched a government erase people." Amazing work from Brenda this week, and a truly standout story as well. I love seeing writers experiment with new formats and structures like this. Next, we have Are Good Intentions Enough After the Apocalypse by Felix Thornfell. With this story, Felix sought to subvert the typical dystopian tropes we all expect, and I gotta say, he did a fantastic job on that front. Unlike most dystopian tales, this one doesn't have a clear-cut good or bad guy in terms of the factions. The reasoning for the city's structure kind of makes sense. As Felix says in the author's note at the end, this is a world where good intentions collide with complex systems. In this world, the rich are just people with valuable skill. They weren't born into their lives, they simply stepped up. There's more complexity, of course, in the full story, but this gives you an idea of how Felix took the prompt in a fascinating direction. It's really, really good work. And thank you to everyone who submitted stories this week. Stay tuned for our next prompt tomorrow. Mystery is in the lead with the poll, and 23 hours remain as of this writing, so unless something changes, you can expect a compelling mystery prompt for next week. Next up is our writing discussion right after a quick mindful moment. Hey there, this is Chill Bradley, here with this week's mindful moment. Here's a quote to consider. "I don't have a lot, but I have a lot of notebooks. They comfort me by reminding me that no matter how hard life gets, I can always write." M. Roy. How do you turn pain into art? Do you write poetry? Do you start a new story? Or do you perhaps paint or draw instead? Creativity is a very powerful way to process things like pain and loss. It allows us to capture in it something tangible. It gives us a place to deposit our thoughts so they're not living inside our minds. So take a moment to reflect on how you use creativity to handle the times when life gets tough. Remind yourself that it's okay to stop and take a breath when you need it. Thanks for listening. Back to the show. And we're back. This week's writing discussion is all about how you convey emotion in your work. I post this thread every Wednesday and read answers here on the show. So let's see what everyone had to say about how they as writers choose to convey emotion in their writing. First up, Graham Brandham says, "It sounds reductive, but I do truly believe you need to feel it first. Words are weird in the sense that they have a definition, but the way that definition tastes in the mouth of another person is completely subjective." That's very true. In English, you can say the word hello 50 different ways with different intonations and give 50 different implications. So in that sense, writing feelings is like a recipe where you work backwards from the finished meal. How did that meal taste? And what words in your mouth make that meal come together? The recipe might not even make much logical sense, but that's okay. You just have to hope that when you enjoy the flavor of the words you put together, someone else will too. I mean, that's beautiful. I love that metaphor. And I wholeheartedly agree. Writing from experience when it comes to these things is a really powerful way to authentically portray those emotions. That's fantastic. Next up, Emerald City Ghosts says, "I tend to be subtle in the way I convey emotion, maybe too subtle. A lot of critiques of my work mention how the tone can be jarring because it often doesn't seem like the characters reflect on the natural emotions that would come along with a dramatic event, like finding someone dead or falling in love. I've tried to do better with this in my recent work, but I'm also a giant sucker for using metaphor or setting to convey emotion. I may have slight sociopathic tendencies. And they put a shrug emoji. I mean, emotion's one of those things where there's no right or wrong way to do it, right? I like the sound of this here, especially using metaphor or setting to convey emotion. I think at the end of the day, not everyone's going to, approve or love the way that you do it, but that doesn't matter because it's not their work. So I appreciate that input there from Emerald City Ghosts. Next up, Sylvian Athara says, for me, emotion always enters through the body first. I write the way people actually feel, like in the jaw that locks before a truth is spoken, in the shoulder that rises without permission, in the way breath stutters when a memory hits too hard. I don't try to force emotion into a scene. I let the character's internal world leak through their physical responses. That's beautiful. I love that. When I'm writing joy, it's never just smiling. It's the looseness, the exhale, the unguarded moment where they forget to protect themselves. When I'm writing fear or grief, I go inward, not to melodrama, but to the quiet details we try to hide. Hands that won't unclench, a voice that sounds borrowed, a thought they can't finish because finishing it would break them. Dialogue helps, but only when the character isn't emotionally articulate themselves. Most people don't say, I'm devastated. They say, I'm fine, while every part of their body betrays them. That contradiction is where I live as a writer. For more complex emotions, shame, longing, internal conflict, I let silence and sensory detail do the heavy lifting. Sometimes a character's biggest confession is the one they refuse to speak. Emotion to me isn't an event, it's a pressure system. And I write it by tracking where that pressure sits inside the body and what it costs the character to hold or release it. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much to Sylvian for that response. Incredible, and honestly, a poem all its own. You could publish that. It's amazing. Amazing input. I have nothing to add. It's awesome. All right, next up, Wild K Nebula says, now I would like to preface this by saying I'm no expert, even though she is. I'm just saying, that's me saying that, but she is an expert. I don't have a degree. I'm not world famous, nor am I an influencer to any extent, and that's going to be a yet on that, not yet. Sorry, I'm editing her post here in real time. She goes on to say, I am a woman who feels deeply. I am a woman who feels nothing and everything at the same time. I am hardwired with empathy, a surplus, enough to drown in another's pain, sorrow, or joy. Emotions, yes, create a physical response. Yes, an emotion is emoted through our bodies. We have our senses for a reason. We are taught 5. 1, eyes, what do you see? 2, ears, what do I hear? 3, mouth, what do I taste? 4, skin, what is in the environment? And 5, nose, what do I smell? Truly, are we limited to these 5 senses? Is it not true that something inexplainable stirs inside us when something is off? A 6th sense. And 6 here is instinct. How am I to protect myself or another? But what if we cannot hear, if we cannot taste, see, touch, or smell? Does our essence not feel? Emotions come from thoughts. Thoughts create rooted beliefs. Beliefs create deep emotions. Our body may or may not correctly reflect this. So if this is true, then that what we can say one thing and our body gives us away, is it not true that we can say a truth and our body does not comply? Questions emote emotions. Internal dialogue emotes emotions. How do we bridge the gap? Metaphors, similes, symbolism, etc. Why? Why are these important? Because cultures and experiences create different thought patterns that create rooted beliefs. And emotion needs more than 5 senses. It needs the perspective that comes from several different places. It needs life. The world around us does this, but in my opinion, what is crucial is the world in our mind. Play around with this. Weave these elements throughout your piece. See what works. See what doesn't. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Signed, Wild K Nebula, aka Nebby. And again, back to back here. Wow, what a response. Just beautiful in the way that it's written, poetic in how it's delivered, and just packed with so much good advice. I love it. Thank you so much to Nebby for that response. Next up, J.M. Gooding says, I don't write emotions. I build the room where they happen. I set the conditions, the lighting, the silence. I give the reader the hesitation, the half-finished gesture, the thing left unsaid, and then I let the reader decide what it all means. Most writers explain what their characters feel. I let the reader feel it for the character. Absence does the heavy lifting. What isn't spoken always lands harder than what is. I don't put grief on display. I treat it like gravity, ever present, rarely acknowledged, shaping everything without needing a speech about it. I don't write the emotion. I write the way the character behaves when they've been shaped by it. Wow. These responses, man. I'm reading these for the first time out loud. It's just incredible. I mean, yeah, JM makes an incredible point here. Honestly, his responses got me thinking about how I approach emotion. Like, this is the way to do it. It's exactly like you said. It's make the reader feel it. Don't show, not tell, as they say. Oh my gosh, amazing. Fantastic response there. And next up, Jennifer Jorgensen says, I like to treat emotions in terms of both the physical and mental/spiritual impact of them. I think a character's physical reactions can create a visceral response in the reader if you do it well. For example, if something hurts your feelings enough, it can upset your stomach or make you feel shaky. Or if you're embarrassed, you can feel the heat in your cheeks. Then I add in the other physical aspects, like another character seeing the pink in your cheeks or noticing your wobble and helping you to a chair, things like that. Dialogue can be a big help too if the scene allows for it. When it doesn't, I will slip in a character's thought processes, not as spoken words, but as those fleeting fragments of thought that float through your head without you thinking about them. If you can add all that together in the setting and scene that have been prepared for them, I think you can really grab readers' emotions and pull them into the moment. Yeah, that's amazing. And I love how Jennifer kind of sets up different sort of scenarios there, because it is true, depending on the scene, you might need to take a different approach. Fantastic. Next up, Justin Zimmer says, I try to embody the emotion, the physiological, and then in the words that are said or unsaid. For myself, to get to the core emotion of a scene, I try to distill it down to the lyrics of a song, then reflect that back onto the page. What details become salient in that state? Are they described, compared? Interactions with other characters help express the emotion, but in solitary scenes, it's the interaction with the self and the environment. Yes. Very good point from Justin there. And I love the example of what you can do when characters aren't like around others to where you can use kind of external things. This is really nice. Very good advice. Next up, J. Allen Winchester says, I approach the emotion the way I learned method acting in college. First, you need to identify the emotion you're trying to express. This way, you can break it down to what comes along with said emotion. Second, when was there a time you felt this way? What sensations did you feel? If you haven't personally experienced it in your life, have you lived it through someone else's eyes? A loved one who shared their experience with you, an actor or actress's performance that resonated with you, or a character's arc in a piece of media that you empathize with. This is what makes storytelling magic. It's sharing the human condition in a way that leaves the reader or audience feeling they have experienced something through the course of the story. When authors grasp this form of magic, it transcends from just writing to living. Authors write the grimoire that actors and actresses pass on to the world. It's why powerful writing captivates the heart and stays with us for our entire lives. Fantastic from Jaden there. Yes, I could not agree more. There's a real nice process in here to kind of pull the emotions that you're looking for in your writing, so I love that. All right, and last up, Taylor V says, when it comes to emotion, I have to feel it first. That's the reason why I predominantly write in first person. Feeling the emotions of my protagonist gives me a better understanding of how they would react in certain situations. There are also times where I would literally act out scenes to better understand my character's body language and movements, so I can have an easier time describing it on paper. I like that a lot. I've always said that when it comes to writing dialogue, for example, reading it out loud is a really smart move because it allows you to kind of use that part of your brain that will automatically pick up if something doesn't sound quite right. So that's fantastic advice. Acting it out. That's really, really good. And thank you again to everyone who submitted responses this week. Next up is our featured guest interview. So this week, I'm sitting down with a phenomenal cosmic horror author and the second place winner of my first Indulgence Challenge from October of this year. He's a writer that needs no introduction, except for the one that's coming up next. So let's dive into this week's featured guest interview. All right, everybody. This week on the Saved as Draft podcast, I'm excited to welcome an author of cosmic horror and medieval dark fantasy who's building a universe of hunger, memory, and poetic dread, one thread at a time. Please welcome to the show, the one and only Connor Mancuso. Connor, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. It's I'm very happy to be here. I was, not saying my fingers were crossed that it would happen, but I'm happy it did. Regardless.
No, I'm really happy to hear that. So let's start off by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and your creative journey thus far.
Yeah, so I'm Connor Mancuso. I will be turning 30 in June, so big 3-0. A little bit about me. So I was born in Germany. I've lived all over the world. I've lived in Germany, Japan, Colorado, Florida, Nebraska, Virginia. I've been to Paris. I've been to a dozen of other different states. I regularly travel for trading card games and writing. And then my creative journey. Oh gosh, where do I even begin with that? So, I mean, I've always had a very vivid, wild imagination, and I've always been drawn to horror specifically. Back when I graduated high school back in 2014, I kind of just stopped, and I kind of just was just being an average, lazy individual. And then I started college again this semester. In my college composition class, my professor had us do a narrative essay. During one class, she asked if she would like, if any of us would like to show her the work for our narrative essay so far, so she could, give feedback on it. So, I raised my hand, and she went on and on about how it was amazing, and I have a gift, and I should keep writing. And I'm like, yeah, sure, you're just saying that, so I'll give you a good rating on ratemyprofessor.com. So I didn't think anything of it. So that following weekend, my girlfriend and I, we went out on a hike so she could do some painting. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I'll just download a couple creative writing apps on my phone. What's the harm?
Mm-hmm.
So I do that, and I download a prompt app, and I start writing the prompt. And that prompt ended up being the basis for my big book, which is going to be it's a very long process. I'm nowhere near done with that. That book's going to be almost 300,000 words. But I did that. I stopped using the creative writing app, and I just started using my computer writing. And then eventually I showed my professor some of that, and she's like, this could be really good. And she's like, you could do really well. And that kind of just catapulted it. And then from there, my girlfriend then told me about Substack. I started Substack, started writing posts about that original book, found your publication, joined your challenge, went from nobody reading it to almost winning an entire month-long challenge out of nowhere. Then ended up getting published 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 separate times in the span of a week. One with Drek, Death, and Doom Publishing by Dylan Bosworth. I am published in his Thanksgiving anthology, which just released on Thanksgiving. I also entered into the Top in Fiction's inanimate horror story short writing contest. I didn't win that, but they were so impressed by my story that I'm in their anthology. And I'm also in another anthology, which is related to you, but I don't think I'm allowed to talk about it quite yet. So we're just going to wait on that. So there's those 3. And then for the entire month of November, but longer, because this has been an idea brewing in my head since the beginning of October, I've been writing my first novel, which the first draft, in fact, I just made a post about it, is almost done. And I'm very excited about it. That novel is actually probably my favorite project outside of the literary magazine. And then on top of my creative journey, I started the literary magazine as well. We have 25 submissions so far. And submissions close on December 15th, so that's good. I'll get more to literary magazine later. But yeah, I mean, that's just kind of my creative journey, a little bit about me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Obviously, a lot going on. You've made a ton of progress in 2025. You mentioned that your girlfriend told you about Substack. How did she discover Substack? Like, what's the journey there?
So we're both creatives. She is a illustrator. She's a painter, primarily watercolor painting, and she does children's illustrations. So she has her own Substack publication, which is Artistic Caroline, and she does children's watercolor paintings and things like that. She's illustrated, edited, formatted, and put together an entire children's book for her friend. She's working on her own children's book. She's made 3 different coloring books. She's making a coloring book, and then she was commissioned to make another coloring book. And then she's also done dozens and dozens of commissions for other people, as well as physical art, like painted wood rounds and stuff like that. So when I told her about me writing, she's like, oh, you should check out Substack. That's where I post my newsletters. And I was like, oh, okay. And I don't like social media, so I was hesitant. But I was like, I'll give it a shot. And I wouldn't go back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting that you say you don't like social media, because as someone who has worked in marketing as long as I have, one of the things that I always talk about, when I'm kind of complimenting you and your work, is how good you are at kind of being on social media, in the sense that you're really good about promoting your stuff, about starting conversations, about like kind of being present. A perfect example is how you've managed to get into so many anthologies so quickly. So it's interesting to me that you would say that you don't like social media, because it seems like you're good at it.
So I don't like social media for a couple of reasons. One, for the most part, it's just a big cesspool of just stuff. And on the other hand, it's just a massive waste of time. And I'm not talking about things like Substack. I mean like doom scrolling on Instagram Reels and Facebook and TikTok and YouTube, and it just sucks so much time out of your day. And I see so many people like, oh, I don't have any time to do anything. And meanwhile, they're scrolling on TikTok for 4 hours. So social media can be a blessing, but you have to use it as such. You can't just let it sink and waste your time. And that's the reason I don't typically like social media, as well as oftentimes what you see on not specifically Substack, but other social media platforms like Instagram and Facebook specifically, the image that you see of that person is more likely than not a facade. It's not the real them. It's what they paint themselves to be. And which is why with myself personally on Substack, everything I post is authentically me. It is me in its truest form. I don't want to make a facade. Now, if people want to believe I'm some giant eldritch being, all the power to them. I'm not going to stop them.
I mean, there's definitely a part of me, even though I'm seeing you right now in person, there is a part of me that still thinks you might be some sort of, unknowable.
This is just the form I take so you don't go crazy.
You know what? I appreciate that. So my next question here is, I'd like to talk a bit about your writing style. Specifically, everything I've read from you on Substack has been kind of in this, I believe I typically refer to as like a form of like epic poetry, I think is how I would describe it. But yeah, I'm curious, like, how would you describe your writing style for someone who maybe hasn't read your work, and what are some of the biggest themes that you kind of focus on?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So yeah, I do not write in the typical style of poetry or narrative prose or creative writing. And I do that for one reason primarily. So I love to read. However, a problem I have with reading is I find myself with traditional block paragraph formatting and standard poetry formatting that I just go through it so fast that I don't absorb anything I'm reading. And I'm like, oh, now I got to go back and read it again and again and again. So when I started writing, I was like, okay, how can I write in a way that fits me, fits what I want to read, but also helps people that might have the same problem as I do? So I don't know if I really created this style. I haven't seen anyone do this, so I'm not going to say I created it, but I started doing a style where I write in a form of poetry that, one, does speed up your reading, but the way the lines are formatted really causes you to stop and really visualize what you're writing or reading before you move on to the next line. So that's kind of how I would describe my writing style. And the themes I tend to focus on, well, cosmic horror for one. That is the biggest inspiration to me. As bad of a person as H.P. Lovecraft was, his writing is influential to my writing and to my overall imagination. And the idea of just, we don't know anything about anything around us and how infinitesimally small we are. I mean, just the fact that we've only explored like 10 to 13% of the ocean. Like, who knows what's out there? We know more about space than we do our own ocean. So, and then recently in my writing, but in my life, I've been leaning more into dark fantasy, especially with this novel, because this novel is actually the origin story of one of my entities and its subsequent cults that was created that I wrote in several of your prompts during the October challenge. But I love dark fantasy because we tend to romanticize fantasy as this glorious knight in shining armor. The hero always saves the day. Good always triumphs over evil. But I mean, if you really look back at medieval history, like things like the Black Plague, or the original Grimm's fairy tales. The medieval period, fantasy period, is not Disney. It's very dark and very grim because it tackles the realities of the world, and that blends really well, I think, with cosmic horror. But I've also gone into detail with a bunch of people about how you cannot make horror without cosmic horror. In some way, shape, or form, cosmic horror is woven into horror. So that's how I would kind of describe, my writing style and the themes that I like to focus on. There are other themes I like to focus on, but I'm going to save that for a later day.
Sure. Sounds good. No, I love that though, and I like that you brought in sort of the dark fantasy side of things too, because I was curious about that. I love that your novel kind of focuses in on that genre as well. That's super interesting.
I mean, if you'd like, I suppose I could read a short little excerpt towards the end of my rough draft of my novel.
If you have an excerpt handy, yes, 100%.
I have all 14 chapters that I currently have written open right in front of me.
I love a prepared guest. All right. Yeah, let's hear an excerpt.
Sure. All right. So let's just do, let's do a little bit of the prologue. Now, keep in mind, for yourself and anyone who listens to this is just the first draft. Things may or may not be changed. Once I finish this first draft, I'm going to be looking for beta readers to go over it and see if I need to change anything. But anyway, so the world lay in ruins, razed to the ground. Drought, disease, and famine. They all threatened to bring humanity's reign to an end. It started simply enough. In the year of our Lord, 758 AD, a sickness sunk its claws into the very earth itself on a quiet midsummer's dawn. The crops went first, molded, rotten, wilting beyond recognition. The peasants called it the Gray Blight. Priests called it God's arithmetic. Though the name truly did not matter. It devoured everything, evenly. Wheat, barley, rye, nothing within or above the soil was spared, until hunger moved through the counties like a sermon. The soil beneath blackened, but did not dry. It pulsed faintly, as if something beneath it was breathing. By autumn, even the cattle would not graze. Their tongues turned gray, their eyes dimmed. Children were born thin, their cries barely large enough to fill a church's nave. And in the north, in a parish too small for maps, men whispered that the end had already happened, that the sun simply refused to admit it. I'll leave it there because I don't want to spoil too much, but that's probably like the first quarter of the prologue.
Amazing. I actually think that was a perfect ending. That last line really echoes and resonates. That was fantastic. Oh, yeah, your style really comes through in that. Having read a lot of your work, I love that. That's
Appreciate
fantastic.
that. Thank you.
And it has that dark fantasy flair too. I'm seeing the elements of the fantasy, like the shift in kind of the word choice and tone a bit, but it's got that cosmic horror that I know you for as well. I love it.
Well, I will say this. So it is very dark fantasy heavy and cosmic horror heavy. I want to say it's not quite 50-50, but the main, and you know what? I'll reveal this. So as you know, in my universe of interconnected writing, there are entities and beings beyond the realm of consciousness and beyond our understanding. And at the center of it all, at least of entities, is the main benevolent entity of my universe. So in some way, shape, or form, this entity will be present in all of my writing. And it is the loom of creation. And it is essentially what it is, a medieval cosmic loom of incomprehensible origin that is the sole creator of the entire universe, and its threads that it creates and weaves are what bind the universe together.
That's fantastic. So I have a question then. In your bio on Substack, you mentioned like one thread at a time, and I mentioned that in your intro here. Is that in and of itself a reference to this being?
It is, and it is.
That's fantastic. God, I love that. That's amazing.
Yeah, so in every post I do, outside of my random notes about talking about random nonsense, if you pay close enough attention,
Mm-hmm.
you can see the little details woven in.
That is brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. I'm such a fan of stuff like that. That's amazing. So, yeah, on the subject of your kind of connected universe or your mythos, as it were, what inspired that concept? Well, I mean, obviously Lovecraft is known for kind of starting the Cthulhu mythos, but I'm curious, like, where did you first get the kernel of that idea to kind of create this huge kind of connected universe across all your stories?
So Cthulhu, I have a gigantic Cthulhu tattoo on my arm.
Nice.
But Cthulhu is my favorite entity of all time. And I love how H.P. Lovecraft's world and universe is connected, has different realms. And in fact, we had a conversation about this a couple weeks ago about how my universe has different realms.
Yep.
And I wanted to create something uniquely my own, but inspired by a writer who is greatly responsible for my inspiration. And I wanted to take the idea of, okay, what if we take the idea of the entities and the realms in H.P. Lovecraft's universe, and we change it to where each of the benevolent and malevolent entities directly correlate to a corresponding human virtue and human vice.
Mm.
So, for instance, my favorite entity that I've created, Cal Kuthal, my giant space whale, who is the main entity, benevolent entity, or malevolent entity in this novel, is the epitome of gluttony incarnate. Just the consumption of everything. So that vice. And then I'm not going to expose the main protagonists and who they represent quite yet, because I don't want to spoil that just yet, but you get the idea.
Yeah. That's fantastic. No, I love drawing something that's unknowable like that to the origins of kind of certain human emotions and vices and virtues and stuff. I think that's really, really interesting because, like gods in general, I think over the course of human history were kind of, representations of things that we didn't understand. It was like our way of kind of applying, meaning to something that we couldn't really apply meaning to.
Exactly. So outside of the entities, the main antagonists and protagonists, the humans, these are my two most favorite characters I have ever created in my entire 29 years of life. Like they feel like my own children. And the antagonist might actually be the most horrifying thing I have ever created visually in my entire life.
Wow.
I said this, and Spencer was like, "I'll believe it when I see it." And I was like, I hope I appease you, because the visceral, like, to put it to you simply,
yeah,
and to everyone listening, the antagonist, this is the most visceral, guttural, bloody image I have ever created. So y'all have that to look forward to.
Interesting. Okay, I like it. I'm getting some really good scoops here on this interview. So yeah, talking about our the challenge that I did in October. You had mentioned that was when you and I had first met. Was during that challenge. If I'm not mistaken, I'm almost positive of this. You wrote something every single day in October for that challenge. Is that right?
I am one of two people. And
Yeah.
the only two people were first and second place. But to be fair, outside of the people who, and if I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments for this, but I believe outside of the people who had commitments in real life, I think the reason that people may or may not have written every day is because they kind of saw mine and oh my goodness, the name.
Mary Ellen.
Mary Ellen. Besides me, I think they saw the points me and Mary Ellen had, and they're like, "There's just no way."
Yeah, no, you and Mary Ellen pulled ahead very quickly and stayed there the entire month, which is crazy because like I think the first indulgence was the third month-long challenge that I've ever done on Substack or otherwise, and it was the first time I'd ever applied a scoring system to it, so it was wild to see. Just the sheer number of engagement that you guys got.
I may not have won it, and I may have had a problem with the scoring system in the beginning, but I will say this. While I didn't win, I held first place for roughly 80% of the entire month. So I
That's
will
true.
take that as a win in my book.
That's true. Yeah. Well, as always, I'm always listening to feedback and thinking about how to improve aspects of it. I think the next big one will be in February. I'll bring back Flash Fiction February, which is how I got started on Substack.
Okay.
So yeah, you heard it first here. And yeah, I think I will try to explore a new type of scoring system. I think in general, a scoring system is fun, and the competitive people in the community enjoy that. I know.
Maybe
So
like a pan. Maybe you select like a panel of like 3 or 4 writers / readers and yourself, and you have a criteria and each criteria has a point. And you judge it that way. I don't know. That might be too complicated. That's just a thought.
no, for sure, and I appreciate ideas like that. Yeah, thankfully I have some time to figure it out.
Yep. You definitely have some time.
So, was that the first time that you had entered a challenge like that? Like, I know you said you downloaded some creative writing prompts, when you were kind of getting back into writing. But I'm curious, like, you just kind of jumped in such a profound way. I'm curious, like, if that was your first time or not.
Yes, that was the very first time. It was only by a miracle that I saw your steampunk power-up prompt, and subsequently after that saw you post about the first indulgence, and I was like, you know what? Let's do it. And then I literally just jumped head first in, and the rest is history.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I will always, that is a core memory for me going forward, is meeting you through that event, experiencing your work through that event. Like, that was amazing.
You are one of the people who I believe are directly responsible for my inspiration level and my continuation of writing.
Well, I am more than happy to be, part of that, and really, really happy to hear it. So thank you. I appreciate that. That's honestly one of the biggest reasons why I'm here. So every time that happens, it's a win in my book. So I love to hear it. So next up, let's talk a bit about your literary magazine, The Oblivion Index. Would love to know more, especially for listeners who aren't familiar. I've been plugging it on the show for several weeks now, but want to hear more about kind of the vision behind that, what inspired it, and kind of what you have planned for it in the coming year.
Yeah, so real quick, for those that don't know, we are still looking to fill some positions. We have a tight-knit team right now, but we are still looking to fill some positions. And you can check out the link that Bradley will post, as well as my Oblivion Index page, for information on that, on how to apply for that. It is not necessary that you have experience working for a literary magazine. It does help, but please understand that if you're on the fence because you don't have experience, we will work with you. We have a great team of people who have experience, like me, Mina Howell, Richard Pack, Judith, Edward. Like, we all have experience in some way, shape, or form, so we will work with you. But on to what inspired so first thing you asked was what inspired it. So honestly, what inspired it to me was when I got on Substack and I started reading more again, I just saw nothing but and this is no fault to people like Marana and Chaos and people like them who write like erotic horror. I think they are wonderful writers. They are incredibly talented. But when I started reading again and getting back into horror and writing, I just saw nothing but just erotic horror, splatterpunk, like all of like the slashers, just the niche stuff. And I was like, I wanted to create a place for writers, horror writers specifically, to be able to have a voice in the kind of, not necessarily niche subgenres, but the subgenres of horror that don't get the time of day or the light of day that they deserve. As popular as cosmic horror is, if you really look, there's really not a lot of like true cosmic horror. So the inspiration was I wanted to create a literary magazine for authors by an author where they could be seen and heard on top of the slush of all the other horror. So that was the first part. And then what else did you ask? I'm sorry, I don't remember.
No, you're fine. So in terms of like 2026 and kind of, getting the magazine up off the ground, maybe if you could tell us a bit about the theme of the first issue, kind of, what you're looking for in submission.
Yeah, the theme and the theme and what else is coming. Yeah. So I'll go into the theme and then what to expect after issue 1. So the theme for the first issue is the things we shouldn't remember. So quite simply, it is a horror theme, and it doesn't have to be cosmic horror. As long as it's not splatterpunk or erotic horror, I don't care. It's just tackling the idea of what are the things that we were never supposed to remember. I don't really quite know how to put it exactly into words, but it's the idea of horror that is just at the corner of your eye, just behind your eyelids. The idea of something so horrifying that even the idea of remembering it causes terror. And then in regards to what to expect coming forward, so the Oblivion Index will have 5 issues a year. So we will have one for every season. So this will be the spring issue. Then we'll have one for summer, fall, and winter. Then at the end of the year / beginning of the following year, we will then, my team and I will go back through the 4 issues of the year, and we will carefully select the best pieces from each seasonal issue into a larger, more prolific yearly issue.
Okay, interesting. I love it. So yeah, this actually brings up a good question of mine then. And then this can be about the magazine specifically, but also just your opinion in general.
Sure.
What would you say kind of defines like the ideal cosmic horror type of story for somebody who's thinking about writing one or submitting?
So cosmic horror is interesting. So it doesn't follow your stereotypical tropes of slasher where there's a serial killer or erotic horror or paranormal where you have to have a paranormal entity. Cosmic horror simply is just the idea of what I said earlier of how infinitesimally small we are in the universe and how unknown everything around us is. Cosmic horror doesn't need grandeur and giant entities like Cthulhu or my beloved space whale. Simply put, it is, to boil it down to its most fundamental aspects, it is, again, for the third time, how infinitesimally small we are and just how little we truly understand. And even though on Earth we may be the apex predator, who knows if that's actually true?
Yeah, no, I think you definitely are right to kind of hone in on that point about, you know, how small we are in the grand scheme of things. I also liked what you said earlier too about how we understand extremely little in the grand scheme of things, which leaves a lot open to possibility. No, I really like that. And you know, another thing about cosmic horror that I'd be curious to get your thoughts on is sometimes I've heard, you know, criticism of like Lovecraft and cosmic horror from people who say, you know, well, he says that it's indescribable, but then he goes on to describe it. You know what I mean? And so how do you approach that aspect of cosmic horror where it's like, how do you, you know, describe something that's unknowable without giving it so much form that it becomes, you know, no longer unknowable?
The best way I can put it is like this. When you are trying to explain something to someone that is indecipherable, you are still able to put it in a language that you understand, or that your listener can understand.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're describing something indescribable, something out of our realm of consciousness, it is the concept of taking that indescribable thing and then translating it into the human language so that we can understand it. A prime example would be H.P. Lovecraft's creation of the Rielian language, or the descriptions that he uses for the creatures. Because what you have to understand is these creatures, these entities that H.P. Lovecraft has created, and not just him, you know, you have The King in Yellow and other great cosmic horror works, where the forms that are being described to us are not what they truly are. It is what our minds can comprehend. So when you are trying as a cosmic horror writer, to explain the unexplainable, you make it so that it is explainable in human tongue.
Okay. Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, because I think that's something that I have struggled with, you know, and it's interesting to hear, you know, like obviously talking to you, I talked to Spencer a few weeks ago. When I talk to horror writers in general, I like to get like kind of their take on that, because there is so many ways you can go about it. It's like you said, you have to translate it into something that can be understood by humans. But I love how you said it's not their true form, right? It's just what we can understand. I love that.
Exactly.
So,
I mean, for instance, like Azathoth is never truly explained. We just know it as this writhing mass of tentacles and eyes, but that's only because the minute you look at it, your mind shatters.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. Great example. Great example. So yeah, looking ahead to kind of 2026 again here, we talked about the magazine, we talked about your dark fantasy novel. Are there any other kind of big writing projects you've got going on Substack or otherwise that you'd like to talk about in the coming year?
So we have the novel, and the title of the novel is The Loom and the Maw.
Good title.
We have my literary magazine, which we've talked about, The Oblivion Index.
Yep.
And then for those that have been with me since the beginning, there's my main book, which is the Nithorus trilogy, which the book one is The Ixer and Spoil. That is still a work in progress. I've kind of hit a writer's block on that. But as for other writing projects, so I've actually already started working on the outline and idea for the second novel after this first one. And this one, I'm just going to go ahead and spoil the temporary title, is going to be Citadel of Luminance.
Ooh, okay. I love that.
And how do I explain that? So it's going to be in the same interconnected universe as the first novel.
Mm-hmm.
But this one isn't going to talk so much about my entities for cosmic horror, more so just cosmic horror at the human scale and the corruption that cosmic horror causes mankind specifically. So that is my next big project. Outside of that, it's just getting I would love to get this novel actually traditionally published. We'll see what happens. Oh, and then I also took all 31 short story prompts that I wrote for your challenge, and that is in a complete manuscript that I'm self-publishing. It's just self-publishing is expensive.
Yeah.
But I actually have like the title, the book, the manuscript, the cover, all of that's done and on my Substack for people, except the manuscript. That's private for right now. In fact, Bradley Ramsey himself wrote the foreword for that, so everyone can look forward to that. I did want it to be released self-published by Thanksgiving. It's looking like it's going to be more like Christmas time.
That's fair.
But that's just because things like ISBNs and all that are just so expensive. But any other really big projects that I have coming up? I mean, honestly, it's really just building my universe and just creating more stories. And then winning your next challenge.
Flash Fiction February. Yeah, that'll be the one. I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be fun. The name is escaping me, but a little while back you had posted also an episode of a potential podcast that you were going to do.
Oh my goodness, yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I have a podcast called The Liminal Ledger, and it's very similar to your podcast. But I don't think I'm going to delve into the challenge thing, and that's just because my life's already busy enough as it is. So the plan for that is a bi-weekly, so every 2 weeks episode. Although I might switch it to a monthly episode if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Yes. So that is a thing. The first episode is out. And that was just me doing kind of an excerpt of a story that I wrote. But that podcast will have everything from talking about my universe to having guest hosts and interviews and silent readings and things like that. So there is a lot to expect from that. I completely forgot to mention that. But yes, so that is called The Liminal Ledger. It's on everywhere you can find podcasts except for Apple, because I can't figure it out. So really, it's only on Spotify because I haven't uploaded it to YouTube yet. But that's because Spotify at least makes it simple. You just press the button, upload it, you're done. Boom. And the podcast will always, so I do have some like on the literary magazine and my personal publication, I do have some like paywall blocked stuff, but that's because, money makes the world go round. But my podcast specifically, that will always be free. That's just a way because I know not everyone likes to read. Some people like to listen more. And I am working very slowly and tediously on going back through all of my stories specifically and narrating or having someone narrate them. So that's another project I'm working on to kind of bring in more readers / listeners.
Good stuff. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I myself, obviously, as you know, make an effort to narrate as much as I can, but I know I know how much work it goes
Oh
into
my
that.
goodness, you were so right about how difficult and like when I saw Mina's post about the podcast difficulties, I was like, oh my goodness, yeah, this is like going through finding the right sounds, downloading sounds, making sure the sound volumes are right, making sure they're in the right place,
Yeah.
making sure there's no awkward silences or coughing or like there is so what people don't listen or realize like when they listen to your podcast or mine in the future
Yeah.
is the sheer amount of actual work that goes into making a small 10 to 45 plus minute episode. And the longer it is, the more work it is.
Yep. No, you are absolutely right. Yeah, it's definitely something that not even I realized until I got into the trenches, and yeah, I certainly know it now.
Yeah, like my first episode of the podcast was just over 10 minutes. I think it was like 11 minutes long.
Yeah.
And it was like 3 or 4 hours of editing and formatting and that was tough. I learned real quick. I was like, yeah, this is definitely not gonna be a weekly thing for me with my schedule right now.
For sure. Yeah, no, I honestly, it's a miracle that mine has managed to go nearly 50 episodes now with, I mean, barely any interruptions.
I mean, hey, with everything, you're killing it. I'll tell you what.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. All right, Connor. Well, that brings me to my last question here, and this is one that I ask everyone who comes onto the show. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this one. I ask, what advice would you give to writers who are just starting out in their creative journey?
Well, the simple. So I have a simple answer and a long answer. The simplest answer is just write.
Yep.
Literally, it doesn't matter if you are a coherent literary genius or someone writing like a Captain Underpants comic book. It doesn't matter your skill level or your comfortability with writing. Just write. Writing is a muscle like any other, and the more you do it, the stronger it gets. I mean, I jumped head first after not doing any writing for, let's see, for 15, 16, like 11 years. I jumped headfirst into a month-long writing challenge after not doing any writing for 11 years and almost got second place.
Yeah.
Or sorry, almost got first place.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, you as a writer, if you're listening to this and you're on the fence on whether or not you should write, or if anyone's going to read your work, just write. Also, on the subject of being worried about people reading your stuff or not, people will read your stuff. But what you have to understand is the most important thing when it comes to writing is create something for yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
The people that enjoy it will come. But if you create something simply to appease the masses, you're going to find that you're going to get burnt out and hate it very fast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really, really good advice. I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah.
So, like to kind of just summarize it, I would just say simply, yeah, like what I said, just start writing, get a journal, use a word processor, open Microsoft Word, open Google Docs. Worry about audience later. That comes later.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Fantastic advice. Yeah.
Like I am blessed that I not only entered the challenge and got second, but that I've been published now 3 times. That's an oddity. I mean, Stephen King was rejected 20 plus times, and he wasn't. And there are people that have been rejected more than him by a landslide.
Yeah.
Like Stephen King isn't even in the top 10 of horror writers that have been rejected. And another thing that I know writers are probably new writers are apprehensive about is rejection.
Yeah.
And this is something that is very true to myself. You will learn more than in a single failure and rejection than you ever will learn from a lifetime of success.
That is really, really good. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. And something else that I would add to that too is I think it was like the 4th episode of the podcast I did. I referenced a conversation I had with somebody because at that point I had just joined Substack and I had been publishing my own work under my name online for over 4 years with very minimal success. And then all of a sudden this year, things kind of took off. And she had said to me back then, overnight success takes years. And I was like, yes, that is exactly right. Yeah. No, absolutely.
100%.
Well, Connor, this was a phenomenal interview. Thank you so much for joining me on the show here. Thank you for sharing your insights and for giving us all those excellent scoops into what you got going on. Just really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. I've been looking forward to this for a while, so I definitely am happy about it. And, I'll definitely have to, once I figure out a good schedule for my podcast, I'll have to have you on and kind of turn the tables on you and delve into your life and writing.
I very much look forward to that. Wandering prompt 3 1 2 0 5 2 5. Write a story or poem set in a world where people disappear if they fall asleep. 1,000 words or less. First to post a link in the comments wins. A second story will be chosen at random. Many may submit. Good luck. All right, and thank you to Connor again for coming onto the show here. That was one interview that I was really excited for, and I think it went absolutely fantastic. I can't wait to hear what you all think in the comments. It's time for next week on Substack. So this coming week marks a new chapter for the Order of the Pawn. Things are heating up, and this week's chapter will be the first of several that cover the full battle of Giant's Bane. It's going to get intense, so stay tuned for that on Tuesday. And of course, this coming week we got a new power-up prompt, and it's looking like mystery based on the poll. Beyond that, I know I mentioned an article last week about how writers can use memes, and as usual, this week got away from me, so let's move that over to next week, and we'll see if we can get it out. I'm hoping so. I also managed to submit an entry to the Oblivion Index, though, this week, so it was still a productive week. Don't forget to check the show notes for a link to submit something of your own to that horror literary magazine before the December 15th deadline. It's not often you get to find yourself featured in the first issue of a new horror magazine, so don't miss this opportunity. That's all I've got for you this week, though. Thank you so much for listening, as always. I'm wishing you all a safe and productive week of writing. This is Bradley Ramsey, signing off. Hey, Voidy, what are you doing out in the rain?
Your tears don't fall, they crash around me. Your conscience calls the guilty to come home.
Yeah, you know what? I'm just gonna leave him alone.